Hit it.
Hey everyone, we've got another Left of Boom show. Today, Michael and I are joined by Dana Wood and Tim Fatum of Envision Strategic Solutions. It's a fractional HR consulting firm. We talk a little bit about what fractional HR is all about, some great leadership tips. Dana's got a new book coming out, From the Mailroom to the Boardroom. And then we also talk about our dream concerts. So hope you enjoy this week's episode.
All right. Hey, everyone. This is Michael VanDervort. We're back with another episode of the Left the Boom show. Good morning, Phil. We're going to introduce our guests in just a second. Today, we're going to touch on a few topics, kind of one of our classic evergreen topics, which is leadership and some specific ideas around that our guests will share. We're also going to talk a bit about the food service industry and kind of the state of affairs there, and also a bit about what seems to be an emerging and trendy topic, which is the use of fractional HR services to help support business and industry. And then we'll close with hopefully a fun little exercise. So I want to welcome our guests. Our guests today are Dana Wood and Tim Fatum from Envision Strategic Solutions. Good morning and welcome to Left the Boom Show. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great.
Yeah, good morning.
Great.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Doing well. Thank you.
I should also mention that my co-host, Phil Wilson, is with us, as you can see. I always forget to introduce Phil, or I say good morning, Phil. Anyway, so let's start with Dana. And just for the benefit of our listeners, quick introduction of who you are and what you do.
Okay. Yes. So good morning, everybody. So yes. So I've got 30 years of experience in leadership in human resources is kind of the main focus of my career. Those years were mostly spent with a large food service distributor and in the food service industry with Gordon Food Service. And kind of started from the ground floor up, started as a frontline supervisor, spent many years doing that in a mailroom, which we had mailrooms back in those days. I'm dating myself here. But and then I worked my way up into human resources, which we'll talk more about later. It's kind of a general attrition into the HR field. And I'm just passionate about leadership. I think in today's environment, and I've dealt with in my career, unfortunately, leaders that just need a lot of help in understanding the human aspect of leading, right? I think we as leaders get the financial aspects and having to do that, but I'm just passionate about teaching from the HR perspective and the people focus of HR. So, and then today, now I work in HR consulting with that theme, staying with that theme of helping leaders learn to, consider people and love their people, so to speak. So.
Cool. And we'll touch on it in a little bit later, but you're also a published author of a book or two, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of starting from the mailroom.
Yes.
I was a letter carrier for the U.S. Postal Service in the late 70s and early 80s for 6 years. And that was back in the day before you had anything like FedEx or whatever. So I was reading some of the intro to your book this morning, Dana, and you're talking about stamps and sorting papers and stapling things. It's a whole different world today, right? But anyway.
Yeah, it was. We didn't have, to your point, Michael, we didn't have email or intranets or anything like that. We had voicemail though, but that was about it. And it was unique. Gordon Food Service was unique in that we sent all of our intercompany mail on our own trucks. We didn't U.S. mail a lot of stuff. It was all had to package up. We probably had 120 boxes, so to speak, each day that went out to, like, if you were a salesman in Kalamazoo, Michigan, you would get your invoices, you would get your benefit checks, you would get everything via paychecks. That was before, direct deposit. You'd get everything via our trucks. So it was a pretty big operation.
I'm imagining the mailroom from Elf. Where they have like all the tubes going in. And anyway.
Absolutely, yes.
So Tim, I don't know what your origin story is as your first job, but why don't you go ahead and share the same info? Tell us who you are, and what you do.
Well, I like to thank you and welcome, and thanks for having us today. But I like to start out that I guess first and foremost, I'm a husband to Jill and a father of three kids, and just became a grandfather
Nice.
about 6 months ago.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
That's been extremely exciting. But yeah, my career has mostly been with the same organization with Dana. We worked together for, I think we were counting today, like 25, probably 30 years. And I started in sales when I was 21 years old. A lot of those mail packages I got came probably from you, Dana.
Yes.
They came down to us. But I spent a number of years in sales, about 8 years in sales. In '99, the head of HR wanted to see me in his office, and I thought, oh boy, what did I do? Am I going to be fired here today? And they brought me in and said, hey, I'd like you to be a leader in the human resources area. And that was it took a totally different turn than I anticipated early in my career. And I spent the next 20 plus years in human resources. And then in '99, or I'm sorry, in 2019, I left and kind of semi-retired from GFS and started Envision Strategic Solutions. And that's where Dan and I are working together today. And we have a couple of other partners we work with. But over the years, we've had the chance and pleasure to work with Phil, and Phil's been a trusted advisor and help for us. That's how we connected years ago, Phil, and we
Yeah.
appreciated the support and what you guys are about. I think we aligned a lot on how we view people and how a company should be run, and what produces a better company. And a lot of that's around relationships. And I think that's where
Yeah.
Dana and I our focus as Envision is, how do we improve employer-employee relationships so that the company can function as effective as possible. And so that's what we're doing today. And yeah, it's been fun. We've been really enjoying it, and it's something that we look forward to doing for a lot of years to come.
Yeah, it's been cool to work with you, on the company side, and then now you're on this new adventure together, and it's not even that new now, but yeah, it's great, kind of just continuing the work that you were doing in house now for others.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that was one of the first things I wanted to ask you about, because it probably happens all the time. And I mean, Phil hired me a couple years ago, and we've known each other for years. So it's certainly not unusual that you partner up with people that you've worked with. But your company, sorry, you have like 4 people that all kind of work together, and that speaks to either a very good relationship over a long time or some complementaries. So how did you decide to take that step, and how did you guys find yourselves working together? Just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And after working so many years together, you develop some pretty good working relationships and friendships. And Dana was one of those, and the other two that are part of Envision, Dave and Barry. We've got wonderful relationships and have worked through a lot of different situations and implemented a lot of different things. We've done acquisitions and downsizings and tried to respond to union threats and so on. And so, but we just really enjoyed working together. And as we stepped away from our day job, so to speak, we wanted to stay active. We wanted to, we like to keep our minds fresh. We like to engage with companies, and is there a way we can give back? When you start out with your first job, when I was first starting, I was just happy to make $20,000 a year and have a company car and be able to sell, and hopefully that I got what it takes, and am I going to be able to pay the bills? And we're in a different stage now where, what can we do to kind of share some of the things we've learned with organizations that are going through growing pains or dealing with issues that maybe we can be of help. And so we partner together on different things, depending on the client. We'll kind of decide who's going to kind of work on what, but it's been a good relationship. I think one of the challenges is that we've done so much over the years. I mean, we've worked on so many different projects. It's like, could you do this? And the answer is, yeah, we probably could. Do we want to? That might be another question. The other day, or a couple of months ago, somebody asked about, hey, would you do a compensation project for us? And could I do it? I probably could. Do I want to? No, I don't think so. But we know somebody. So, well, I think kind of saying no to the things that just aren't in our wheelhouse or, where we want to be. I think we got to be careful around that, but there's a number of areas where we can come alongside an organization and help them improve.
I would say one of the big keys to being successful in consulting is fighting that urge to say yes to everything that comes across your desk, and focusing on like what are you great at, what can you be the best at, and do more of that, and don't say yes to everything that you could do.
Yeah, like in our case, I haven't been around for a lot of this ride, but like we've developed specific kind of like partnerships with people that are experts. To your point, like you said, somebody that could do a comp project, so it becomes a referral where maybe then you get something back someday, right? But to Phil's point, it lets you practice what you want to practice. How about you, Dana? What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think an interesting note, I agree with what Tim said, but an interesting note is that the other, with Tim and the other two partners in Envision, they've all at one point been my boss at some point. So, but it's been great. It's, as Tim mentioned, it's been the relationships, and because we know each other so well. And I think the thing that really works too is we know each other's strengths and weaknesses. Like Tim said, a comp project. No, that's not in our wheelhouse. Tim's the analytical one, I think. Tim, and Tim's the good business planner. I'm more the big picture. I like employee engagement, employee relations. I like leadership development. That's my thing. Our other business partner, he's into, the benefits area. So we all kind of bring something different to that. And we all know each other's, like I mentioned, strengths and weaknesses. So that's been great.
Cool. So one of the things, like you guys came out of the food service side, the warehousing and delivery side, and I know that when we did a call a while back, you're providing some fractional services in the restaurant industry, and I think I don't know where this will take us exactly, but that's a volatile industry right now. There's the 800-pound gorilla in the room is Starbucks, which Phil and I have talked with other guests about on the union organizing they're experiencing and some of the business difficulties that they've had with the corporate campaign. Red Lobster and Mod Pizza and a number of other chains are going out. I mean, it's always volatile, but it seems maybe like this is more challenging now than ever. And I think there are a few, like the pandemic drove a lot of people out of the industry because restaurants were closed for a long time. And I don't know if, they've not been able to recover from the talent drain that they experienced or whatever. But you guys provide some fractional services to like franchisees and other things. And I was kind of curious if you could give us maybe an overview about the challenges and the kind of things that you deal with in that industry. It's one that is a huge employer in the U.S. and how that. I just like to learn more about it.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I just out of curiosity, have either one of you served at a restaurant before, growing up or in your career?
Yes.
I was a short order cook,
my hand
not
here,
a server, but I was the back of the house. I dishwasher, busboy, and then cook for a long time through high school and college. So I was where I learned a lot.
Only job I've ever been fired from.
Well, I just asked because, there's a large percentage of people in the U.S. and probably other countries as well that have started a career, been in the restaurant industry. And you're right, Michael, it's pretty volatile right now. It's been challenging. I think, one of the headwinds that has been just hitting them hard for the last couple of years, obviously COVID was, tragic, and those that made it through that, probably were stronger after that, than going if you made it through it. But inflation has just been a really tough thing. And restaurants usually look at, they call it prime cost, and so it's labor and food cost or supply cost. And boy, that's just gone up, substantially. I mean, you've seen it on billboards, right? You're going down the road and you look up and McDonald's is hiring a cook for a number that's 30%, 40% higher than a couple of years ago, and you're thinking, man, that's amazing. And so then the food cost has gone crazy, and prime cost generally is probably 60 to 70% of your sales.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have the exact numbers, but I think that that number has had to drift up unless people have adjusted price. And I think that's part of the answer is you can, in the restaurant industry, you can make portions smaller, you can lower the quality of your cost, you can raise your price to try to adjust for this inflation thing going on. But what's happening is 60%. A recent survey just said about 60% of people are either spending less when they go out or trading down,
Mm-hmm.
going to a different cost more or cost less. So that's been tough. And if organizations can't figure out how to control that, you can't lose money forever, right? How long do you lose money on a week to week, month to month basis before you got to say, hey, I'm out? I think the other big thing is the workforce. It's been a challenge there. I would say, though, it's better. During the pandemic, we looked around and said, where'd everybody go? Where's all the workers? We couldn't get enough, and we had all these jobs we're trying to fill. I think that's gotten substantially better, but I do think that, do we have the right people in the right seats? And do we have the same level of engagement that we had, back when? Um, and and I think then the other thing is how is the workforce responding to these things? So companies try to save money. Maybe they don't have as many employees on staff, or they're raising prices. And the workforce, I think, is oftentimes not happy with how companies are handling those situations.
Mm-hmm.
So it may mean check out and stay. They may leave and go somewhere else, or they might, you guys here, right? They try to form a union. They do different things because they don't feel heard. They don't feel, important. And what we try to really, coach, people we work with is you got to pay attention to your financials and your P&L, and you got to make sure that you got some money on the bottom line. So, but at the same way, you got to make sure that you're doing so in a way that continues to engage and communicate well with your people, and make sure they understand as much as possible why. And have a plan to approach that, because you won't exist tomorrow by performing like yesterday, right?
Yeah.
You just can. And if you think you're just going to do it like you did pre-COVID or even a year or two ago and make it, I don't think you're going to make it. I think it's going to be, so you got to perform differently today so you'll be here tomorrow. And I think that's what we're trying to say. And there's no cookie cutter approach to that either. I think that what is good for one organization might be totally different than another. So you got to kind of assess and look at that. But
Dana,
I
I'm
think those are
curious. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, Dana, I'm curious about your what are like a couple of you go into a restaurant or food business that's got some employee relations issues. What are some of your kind of like go-to tips to do what Tim says, which is to, like, you can't just focus on the bottom line, but what do you do to really engage? What are really challenging jobs, very, very difficult jobs.
Right. Yep. I think a couple of things. So first of all is listening to the employees. Sometimes we go in and sometimes we'll just walk around and talk. Right. What's
Mm-hmm.
going on? What do you like here? What's not going well? And then really focus with leadership and try to figure out their concerns. What are they facing, and how can we help them become the better leader to meet their employee needs? Kind
Mm-hmm.
of going back to your book too, Phil, approachability. How can
Mm-hmm.
we help them be more approachable? And because that's what our workers want today, right? Our new workforce of today. Does that leader care about me? Is that
Mm-hmm.
meeting my needs? The other thing big, I think, Tim, you mentioned the workforce, and yeah, it tends to be a transient type workforce. I mean, there's not the commitment. I can work here
Yeah.
until they're going to offer me 50 cents more. I'm going to leave tomorrow and probably just ghost their employer and never come back. And I think one thing about that is to help them with the scheduling is a big thing in the restaurant industry. It's a weekend, late night job, and I think the key thing too is to look at that. Is that employer being flexible with that? And there's a new tool. In fact, I just saw something come across my computer this morning about a tool that'll help employers do that and give the employee the ability to change schedules. Oh, I can't work Sunday. I got Johnny's birthday party. Oh, Teresa, can you trade with me? And so I think that's a big thing too, is helping restaurants, meet kind of that flexibility portion that their workforce wants today.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I would just add to that too, Dana, I agree does the employer understand what their people are thinking and understand the risk of what's going on? I think sometimes they're trying to address these issues that are real issues, but they don't know that there's a union risk looming, or they don't know what the real issues are, and they're asking the questions. And one of the tools and things that we do is we conduct roundtable discussions where we sit with employee groups in face to face, not electronic, filling out the 67-page survey online to who knows where it goes, right? And we ask the question, how are things going, and how are they doing in that face to face interaction. One of the times we did it, and one of the managers sat in the back, and he was just shocked at all the information that they heard. Or we heard, just by asking that question and taking the time to do that. But then it's also taking that information and trying to, how do you take that and quantify it and make it actionable so that you can actually do something with it?
There's with all of this kind of, AI and all the analytics and all the stuff that you can do, it really boils down to a face-to-face conversation and being able to get across the fact that, like, I care about you. I want you to have a great day at work. If you're struggling with something, let me see what I can do to try to help overcome that. These are very, very basic, simple, they're simple to do. That it's not easy during the rough and tumble day at a restaurant or retail. Pretty much any business, to actually take that time. That's why like anybody can do a roundtable, right? That's not some like magic thing, but it's just taking the time to actually do it and have that conversation. It's a lot of times it's difficult to kind of get there.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So I'm curious about the working. So like if you work with a franchisee, it's presumably an owner. It could be corporate, but presumably there's like a person, a guy or whatever. And you guys are a vendor to that person, and then you also have to kind of act in the traditional HR role, which is a kind of a quasi advocate, quasi, policy cop kind of thing. How does that work in a fractional role, and how are you effective in doing that? Because that has to be challenging.
Yeah, I think that the reason we feel it's an effective way to approach HR is that regardless of what size you are, if you got more than one employee, you've probably got some HR people things that you got to pay attention to. In fact, I always joke, you go to a typical meeting of a department or a team, and I think they spend 60 or 70% of their time talking about people things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it just is, right? And so, but the fact is, a lot of organizations can't afford an HR director or a manager even. They need help, but they got to deal with those issues. And so, a fractional HR support role is there where somebody can call Dana and say, "Hey, I'm dealing with an issue," or maybe it's a regularly scheduled weekly meeting, and it's a resource for that organization to call and to talk through some of these very gray issues that can occur in a business. They can either, if they don't do this, they could call legal, which one of our clients is saying, "Boy, that works, but it's expensive. I don't know, $400 or $500 an hour, maybe." And then, or you maybe make the decision without the guidance, and then later on you're dealing with some consequences.
It's also be expensive.
It's more expensive than the attorney,
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think that we set up an intake with the client, get to know them. I think it's really important to understand as much about the business as possible, because in the end, we got to help that business be successful. If that business doesn't succeed, then nobody's got jobs, and we don't have a client. And so we got to make sure that we understand their business as best we can, and we kind of set up the cadence, but a lot of these things, like if it's employee relations, I think that sometimes most of the time you can't predict those things, right? They pop up, and there's an issue, and you got to deal with that as quickly as you can.
Okay.
So Tim, in the kind of in assuming the role as a fractional HR person inside it, like how do you address that with the like in these meetings you talked about doing focus groups or listening sessions? How do you address that with the employees, and how do they receive it? And then also, how do you like deal with an on-site manager? Because there's always like you sort of mentioned that you got a call from HR once, and you're like, oh, I was in trouble. You have a double thing. You're HR, but you're also to some extent technically an outsider. So I'm kind of curious how you guys bridge that gap, if there is one, and maybe there isn't.
Well, I think it sort of depends on the scenario, but the HR fractional oftentimes operates sort of behind the scenes, and so what we want to try to do is enable the current leadership team, who should be leading the business, and they do. We want to come alongside them and say, okay, what's going on? What's the best way to approach this? There are times where we're going to say we need to talk to legal, right? Because this could be pretty sticky situation. There are times where we just coach them on, do we coach the employee? Do we warn them and maybe guide them through the process, and they do it. So they don't necessarily see Dana or I in a scenario like that. If we're conducting a roundtable discussion, then we set that up, and we come in, and we're presented as a independent third party coming to help learn more about the business, and the company wants to learn more and hear from you, and so they've hired Envision to come in and ask you how things are going, and then we work through that process of asking questions and gathering the information. And we don't record names. We don't. In fact, we wouldn't probably in most cases know the names anyway. Yeah. So it's anonymous. And then we provide that back to the owners or the leaders. The one benefit as the consultant is that sometimes the news, you got some really good things to share, and sometimes they're not so good. But we're not so worried about losing our job because we're going to tell them something that isn't good. We're just trying to make sure that they understand what the perception is from their team, from their employees, so they can address those. And then we also provide recommendations on a way to move forward with those things. So
I want to hear about Dana's book.
Yeah, that's I was going to say. We're going to switch to a couple different areas, but that's a great jump. So the title of the book is From the Mailroom to the Boardroom, and I don't think it's your first book either, but it just was released in June, right? So tell us about it.
Yeah.
And your co-author, who's not on the show.
Correct. Yeah. So it's From the Mailroom to the Boardroom, and it's kind of my co-author, Kirk Zell. He was also one of my bosses. He started out in sales similar to Tim, and as I mentioned, I started in the mailroom, and then he made it all the way up to the general manager of a multi-billion-dollar division or organization within Gordon Food Service. And so what we did is we collaborated on our stories of leading and people. And how I think we start out the book by saying, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation this morning, it's not about the finances and all that, even though we stress that's important, because if you're not making money and you're not paying attention to that, nobody's going to have a job, right? But it's about the thing that we're passionate about, as we've talked about, people, and how leaders need to understand and truly, in the agape form, love their people and focus on understanding. One thing that was always amazing to me is how I led during that day and how I treated people. That just didn't stay at the workplace. That resonated into the dinner table at night, right, of the staff that I was entrusted to lead. And so I tell it kind of from the frontline perspective, and then working my way into HR. And then Kirk tells his way of working, starting out as a sales, actually started out as in the back of the house in a restaurant, only went into work for a food service company because his restaurant went out of business. that he was working at. And his salesperson at the time says, "Hey, why don't you try sales?" And his initial thought was, "Well, okay, I'll do that just to learn more about the food service, and I'll go open my own restaurant." And he ended up staying, as I did, 30 plus years. And so he worked his way up. I worked my way up from the board or from the mailroom into human resources executive, and he worked, like I mentioned, up into it be a GM. And it's all those steps in between and how we led.
Cool. Well, a lot of the best leaders are the leaders that sort of started at the bottom and kind of worked their way through and can still, you made the point, but like can relate back to, I used to have this job. I used to work in the back of a restaurant. I used to work in a mailroom. I know what that day is like. And then to your point, that relationship with the leader, it's not like, okay, it's 5 o'clock and everyone goes home and you just like erase what just happened. What just happened is what you're going to be talking about the rest of the day. And even if it's a tough day, even if it's, not everything went right, which is most days, the feeling that you have about that leader and sort of, you can either be kind of like coming through that and feeling horrible, or you can come through that and be like, wow, that was a tough day, but we like overcame a big challenge. And that really is just in the hands of your leader.
Right. Yeah. And I think that the big thing is that we learned, right? Kirk and I are telling our stories of our bumps and bruises along the way. I think I tell a story in there about pride and ego, which we both, Kirk and I felt that's kind of the downfall of many leaders. And I had one where I thought, boy, we won Department of the Year in a mailroom, and boy, I had arrived.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to do the company did their first 360 feedback session, and I got those results, and I'm going, oh no. Then it's like, of course I'm in denial. They just didn't understand my job. So I'm going to tell them, and then I get to read the comments, and it's like, oh no. And yeah, so my pride and ego it changed the way I was leading. And so, so there's stories like that about how, the bumps and bruises and how we learned along the way about all these pitfalls that, that we did in leadership and how we learned from them. So,
yeah.
I read the sample intro on your Amazon page, and in whatever portion of the book that came out of I believe it was in your portion, you said you realized as a leader early on, and the words sound really dramatic, but that you held the lives of people in your hands. And it's not like you're like, I can crush them like some evil supervillain, but more so what you said a minute ago about how what you did and how you led them and how the experience that they had at work kind of carried forward throughout their day, right? And that really is kind of an awesome. That really is kind of an awesome responsibility, and it goes back to what you teach in approachability about like how it can improve not just your leadership life at work, but make your life at home better. And so this is something that I feel like many leaders don't understand and maybe take for granted. They don't know how much what they say or do impacts someone.
The job of a leader is so hard. And like, we didn't really circle back to this, but the whole, it's not just the economy and the labor market has like been hammering first line employees, but like that first line supervisor is stuck between, the folks that are getting the work done day to day and then upper management that's like, we got to make the numbers. That job is so hard. And they're like some of the least engaged folks in America just because it is such a challenging job. And it's very easy to talk yourself into, I'm stuck here. What I do doesn't really matter. I don't really have that big of an impact. Like it is so easy to talk yourself into that. And then Michael, to your point, and then Dana and Tim, this too, you're powerful beyond your imagination, actually. Like you have massive impact, and the ripples of what you do during the day impacts not just that employee, not just that employee's family, their friends, wherever else they pour themselves into, their community, their church, like their hobbies, like all of those relationships are really heavily impacted by that one extremely important relationship, which is your job, right? That's what pays for everything, and that's, you get a lot of your personal value out of it. And if that day to day, is garbage, like kind of the rest of your life is,
Right.
and leaders don't really think about it that way very often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, Phil, to your point, leadership, especially that as you mentioned, that frontline leadership. I mean, there's emails, right? Hundreds of emails today.
Mm-hmm.
Your boss is on you, like you said, the bottom line. Oh, your numbers, your production numbers, or whatever isn't where it needs to be. You have people. Your office is a revolving door.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly. And, I can relate at the end of the day, the last thing I really wanted to do, have to go and, 10, 11 hours at it. And then, I got a line outside my door. But hey, that's what that we signed up as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure that we address that line outside the door and don't put that other stuff as the major importance, because it can be very easy to sit in front of this computer all day, right? And answer your emails, do all your reporting, do all your meetings, that type of thing, and forget about, hey, those people you're entrusted, they're entrusted to you. Take care of them.
Yeah.
I think part of the the fabric of an organization, if they have open door policy where I'm willing to talk to you anytime you have a need, servant leadership, that you're leading with the servant's heart and the attitude, and your ego is checked at the door. And the organizations that can, make that part of their culture and values, I think tend to do better in that area. And that's kind of the world we grew up in. And really, man, if I'm sitting in my office working, my door is not closed. It just isn't. It's kind of figurative, but it says, you got an issue. Hey, got a minute? Of course I do. Come on in. Let's talk. Mm-hmm. And trying to do that, just that simple door closed. And I get it. Sometimes if you're on a call like this, you got to have a door closed, but I think there's subtle little things every day. And you're right, Phil. I think that we're entrusted to the care of these people that work for us, and we're impacting their lives. Is it for the positive, or are they at home talking about us at night saying, "Man, I can't believe what happened today"?
Right. You're having an impact. Just which kind is it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It took me about a third of my career to learn that chasing money, like I'd chase a salary, I get a raise. Oh yeah, a new job, sure. But they weren't always necessarily the best circumstances, right? It was, bad cultures or whatever. And and eventually realized that who you work with and who you work for make a whole hell of a lot of difference, more better long-term and in the culture of the organization. Mm-hmm. And we have a question we like to ask on the podcast, which I'm going to ask both of you here, and I'm going to jump to Dana first, just because apparently she's worked for everybody that ever was her manager. So that's so I'm not sure how you're going to single out.
She's obviously the one who gets stuff done. Like all of her bosses are like, we got to have Dana.
Right. Yeah, she's the GSD person, just like our FFD, right? Anyway, so the question is, Dana, this might be challenging for you, and you may have to say everybody, but the question is, who's a leader that believed in you and helped you grow more than you thought you could?
Okay, I have to say Tim and the gentleman that I co-authored the book with, Kirk Zell, and I'll tell you why. Again, being in the mailroom, and I didn't have my college degree yet, okay, and yet Tim and Kirk saw something in me, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, "Hey, do you want this director job at one of our, a $1 billion division in the company, one of them in the most profitable division? It was this division that I was part of that was the profit center and helped, build the other divisions." And again, frontline supervisor, no college degree yet, and they saw something in me and believed in me. And I went from a frontline to a director. That was a big jump. But with Tim and Kirk's support, I was able to do that. And again, the support they gave me to keep going and keep learning, which I think is key to any leader. Leaders never arrive, right? We've always got to keep learning, because what we do as leaders today probably won't work a month from now or a year from now. But and between the encouragement of those two, I was able to learn, grow, finish my college degree, and then move up even from a divisional director to a regional director because of Tim and Kirk's faith. And I want to tell this story. That this is again about leadership. So I had been in my divisional role for a while, and I finally got my degree. And we were in an HR directors meeting that Tim was leading, and they gave me a plaque from my diploma, from my degree. And that was back in 2009. And stuff like that still, I mean, I remember that day of Tim and his assistant at that time, Donna, coming to me. I didn't even know they really realized I graduated, and recognizing me in front of my peers. So little things like that, that leaders do stick, again, since 2009, how many years later, 13 years later, 13, 14 years later, still remember that. So it's those little things leaders do that will stay with people forever.
Yeah, for sure. How about you, Tim? Same question. Who believed in you?
Yeah, I think that one reason maybe I looked at Dana and saw potential is because somebody did that for me when I was in that sales role and I got that call to come to HR. I was still young. I had never managed before. Didn't have an HR degree. There was just a lot I didn't know. But the leader of HR at that time had worked with me. He knew that I had good relationships with my peers and with my boss and with customers, and we saw that. And I think the other thing is he knew that I understood the business and kind of how it worked. And I remember him saying, "I can teach you the HR stuff. We can get you up to speed on that. That's just knowledge." But he wanted the other stuff, and so I remember he'd sit, he'd come in, and then he let me, present something, a new project or a kickoff a new initiative or something, and I'm presenting, and I frankly probably had no business doing that, right? And so, but he let me go. But he was there as a safety net for me. It reminds me. Did you ever hear that story about the professor he's given a speech to college students all over the country, and he's given one speech after another, and finally he's just dead tired, and he says to his assistant, he goes, "I can't do it tonight. I'm just too tired." He goes, and the assistant says, "Well, I've watched you do this for hundreds of times now." And he goes, "I can do it. Let me do it." So he let him do it. So he presents to the next group, and it was flawless. He went through the presentation and the points and everything, and asked questions, and he answered every question to a T. And once the small guy in the back raised his hand and says, asked him a question he had never heard before, and he didn't know what to do. He kind of panicked, and he says, "That is the dumbest question I've ever heard. I can't believe you're asking me that question. That in fact, that's so dumb. I'm going to have my assistant answer it for you." And professor, right? And so, but Dave was, he was the guy that knew, right? And I'm up there presenting and saying things, but man, I that was development, and that was investing time, and he knew that I could do it. I had to do it, and so I've always, in fact, Dave's one of the guys you see in our team here. So, but he's been just a great mentor and had a lot of faith in me, even when I didn't. And, I think that if we can, and then, Dana comes along, and you're right. She's a worker. She gets it done. And so a lot of potential there. And so, so begins another journey there, which I think was wonderful and created another, good opportunity for her.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to ask you a closing question, and it's two parts. But first of all, thanks for being our guest today. We really appreciate the discussion, the chance to sit down with you guys. And I'm gonna lead with Phil, because we always try to do a sort of fun wrap up, not really pertinent to leadership or any of the more tough topics. So when your turns come, though, you'll get a chance to add any final thoughts and then share your perfect concert. So, Phil, if you could pick two artists that you would pair together, and it can be performing in concert or on one song, who would you like to see as your dream combo for a musical performance?
This is a tough one. Well, one of them they already did it, which is the Rockin' Tours, which is Jack White and Brendan Benson, which is like an amazing band. I like both those guys. I would probably do Neil Young and Matthew Sweet. Matthew Sweet is like my desert island. He's a little off the beaten path, but like if I can only bring one artist, but it's because he plays a lot of Neil Young songs, and so he plays a bunch of other stuff that I really like. But anyway, those two would be really cool to see together.
Awesome.
And yeah, Dana and Tim, thanks so much for joining us. I'm anxious to hear your dream concert.
Go ahead, Dana.
Okay, so being from Michigan, I had to think about this because I was more probably rock back in my younger days, and then last 20 years probably been more country. So I had to chose kind of a combination of both, which today they would both be considered country, and one is, and that is Kid Rock and Bob Seger.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, remember the live album? Boy, when I was growing up, that live Bullet, it was called, and then Turn the Page.
Yep. Get Out of Denver.
Little too tall. I could use a few
I was at
pounds.
two of those shows. They recorded like 5 nights. I was at 2 of those shows back in the day. So, how about you, Tim?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I got such an eclectic music taste. I like almost every type of genre, but kind of going back, and this probably isn't possible, but because one of them's dead, but Nat King Cole, who I remember my mom and dad, just that smooth voice and easygoing style, and Ed Sheeran, the singer-songwriter.
That's very eclectic.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah,
it's like
cool.
I wonder what they would do. Like just what would come out of that. So anyway.
Yeah.
What about you, Michael?
It's funny. I saw a TikTok video about the David Bowie Queen song "Under Pressure," where they were saying like Bowie sang all the lyrics, and all Freddie ever did was go like "bee bee bee bop." But I loved that song, and I would love to have seen them do an album. So that would have been, or a concert. That would have been cool. I've always been a huge Bowie fan, and Freddie Mercury, of course, got lost way too early. So that was that. And I've seen 2 shows, Billy Joel and Elton John, which is kind of the classic example that helped me think up this idea. And I also saw Sting and Peter Gabriel, which was maybe the best concert I've ever seen. And one of the most humorous in that you had to see Peter Gabriel, who at this stage of his life looks like an old English plumber, dancing and performing an English the Sting song, the English Gentleman, whatever that is called.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So Peter was dancing, if you can call it that. It was hysterical. So anyway, thanks a lot. We're going to go ahead and end the show, and we'll chat with you again down the road. Thanks for being our guest.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.